What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. I am Christopher Bean with Tactical Advantage, and today we're going to find out, can you still make accurate shots if your dot has failed or your battery's died?
Palm pepper spray is next generation OC spray. It's hot at 1.4% major capsaicinoids, and its modular design means you can customize it exactly to you. 3 different setups, lots of different color combinations. You can make it exactly as you like. And the flip top safety prevents accidental discharges. It's 10 to 12 foot range and 25 half-second blasts. Make sure that you can keep that long range eye poke at long range. I trust Palm OC and I recommend it for everyone for self-defense.
What's up, everybody? So a question came up in our live stream the other day about somebody that's relatively new going to the dot, and they're concerned about backup iron sights, what they should use, what can they put on their gun to ensure if their dot fails, they have some kind of secondary sighting system, which is noble. But one thing I wanted to kind of talk about is there is an alternative method that you can use with your optic housing all by itself. And what I did is created some visual aids to kind of help show you guys that and kind of just talk through that a little bit. So really the idea that I'm talking about is called framing. And framing is using your optic housing to still leverage as a sighting system to make accurate or reasonably accurate shots in case the optic fails, the battery dies, something like that happens. So the first thing I want to say here is, me personally, I do not care one iota what kind of sighting system you prefer. Whether that be the red dot, whether that be iron sights, any myriad or variant of either of those. It doesn't matter to me as long as you're putting in the effort to understand the larger macro picture of how they work. And I think very few people do that. So for me personally, I mean, this is kind of a joke, but I could care less if you stapled a gummy bear to the front of your muzzle that helps you sight that gun. Because all of these things, as long as it's fixed in space, it has a fixed orientation with the muzzle of the gun, it can be utilized as a sight. You just have to understand how it works. So with that said, let's really get into the idea of the optic and the optic housing. So a dot is projected onto a piece of glass in an optic housing. Now, that shroud of said optic is also fixed in space to the gun and can be used to provide information much like a dot or an iron would. People don't like doing that because it's relatively a gross sight picture, and or they haven't taken the time to really understand what that looks like at different distances. So that's what I'm hoping to cover today. So every sighting system is either providing you gross or fine information. Your interpretation of that is what allows for accurate shots with the gun. The gun can be inherently accurate. The sights can be inherently accurate, but it's your interpretation of that sighting system that allows good, accurate shots to happen. And so everyone has limitations. Dots have limitations. Iron sights have limitations. Using the shroud of your optic has limitations. Using the backplate of your gun, or this general orientation of the firearm, how the slide interacts with the target, all of these things have pluses and minuses. But you need to explore for evidence. Once you understand how these things work, you can understand how to utilize them and get the result you want. Hence why we're doing this right now. The last thing you have to do is begin to trust the information that you've gained through exploration and experimentation to use in the really real world. I can show you exactly what optic framing looks like, But until you try it and understand how to hold or orient that gun using that sighting system, you won't 100% understand how it works. So really we'll jump kind of right in. So what I used was a Holosun 507C. And every optic you do this with, you would have to kind of figure this out because they're all shaped different. How that glass would orient or that shroud would orient to a target, you have to learn for yourself. But understand these shapes and the sizes I'm using are directly related to the Holosun 507C. And what we have right here is just a generalized kind of picture of a target and how that optic shroud might interact with it. But we're going to do this the fun way. So what I've got is varying different distances. I went and tested this, gridded out a target, and kind of drew a cutout or a template at each distance to show you guys what that optic shroud looks like or how much it would cover at a given distance. So we'll just start with that. So at 3 yards, this is about the area that my optic shroud covers. Now remember, we're talking about no dot existing, just using the shroud and the glass. And that gives us a shot that's easily within the head alpha zone of an IPSC target. So certainly can make very, very accurate shots here. Even 1-inch squares, I would feel relatively comfortable doing it with that without much concern whatsoever. Then we have 5 yards, and that gives us this. And we're just going to kind of move around here. Alphas are very achievable. B8's very, very achievable. So no big issue there. At 7 yards, and you notice they just get progressively larger. That's the shroud in relation to the target. Still very good, a little bit out of the alpha zone, but once you understand triangulation, that becomes less and less of an issue. So we can frame our target, and notice we have some overhang on this side, some overhang on this side. Once you understand how to cut or frame that target, that becomes less of an issue, if that makes sense. So no big issue with 7 yards. At 10 yards, we're starting to look like this. So still absolutely doable. But what I did on this one for you to see is if you just split how that window is. So I just put in kind of hash marks like you would see in a rifle reticle on all 4 axes, and you kind of can see, okay, well, if we're worried about how this is, we could really go and frame the target and still get relatively pinpoint accuracy at differing targets. But at 10, you're starting to have to do some work and understand how this works. Then we have 15. So still we're looking at Alpha Charlie area right there. But again, like we talked about before, once you understand how to triangulate this and center this on your target, certainly doable. Certainly doable. Now 25. So now we're getting into like the delta area. But again, centering this is the key. Once you center this in a target frame, you have the ability to understand where that dot would be. Now, one thing that's very important when utilizing this, you have to have a pretty solid understanding of your index. So you're using a visual reference to frame onto the target, but you still need to understand the orientation of the muzzle. So if you have like a very high pitch on it, a very low pitch on it, that could impact how that shot works. So some work needs to be done to understand that index. Are you parallel as appropriate with the target? And how do you figure that out? And how do you plan on figuring out triangulation to ensure that this more gross sight information provider is giving you the information you need? Now I have something I can show you guys with that. So This may be difficult on camera, but this is a Canic Rival S with a Holosun 507C. It's barrel blocked. But one thing I wanted to show you is when I'm learning a new gun that orients differently, what I will do is just put some hash marks on the housing itself, one on the top side and the side. I'm not sure if you can see that or not, but just some really small hash marks. Some optics actually have those built in. And what that does for you is it helps you figure out the orientation or the actual angle of your muzzle because it's different, right? Glocks, HKs, there's a myriad of things that are just slightly different, but it gives you some kind of reference to help work out your index, especially if your dot's not working. And then just using that triangulation, you have an open area that you can use that is providing you with sighting information, just ensuring that you're not making a mistake with elevation. Once you have that kind of figured out, you're solid. Next would be understanding your holds. And this applies to every sight. This applies to irons, this applies to dots, all of these things, it matters. And rarely do I see people really test to the point where they fundamentally understand their holds with that gun, be it limitations of their sights or limitations of their ammunition. That's testing. That's going out and instead of just shooting a drill, push things out to distance, try some different things and really learn your gun. That is what will make a huge difference in being able to utilize your tools no matter the situation you're in. Because do batteries go dead? Yes. Do front sight posts fall off? Yes. But that gun has all the information you need to continue to shoot and make quality shots that are accurate enough to get the job done. So I want to be careful as I'm talking about this, that you understand I am not advocating point shooting. I am not advocating one or the other. What I am advocating is understanding the sighting system you're currently using in all possible scenarios. So go and test these things, understand these things, and you'll find yourself a little more resilient if things go wrong. And golly, hopefully you never have to figure that out in a defensive encounter. But all of these things work. So that's the first thing. I might talk about backup iron sights in another video and what might be some considerations of that. But I want you to clearly understand you can frame with an optic and you can get it done. I'll give you guys a little story on one of the most impressive demonstrations of this I've ever seen. Where a few years ago now, I was actually a student in a class of Riley Bowman in his pistol intelligence class. And this was in Idaho. And he was doing a drill where he has a target at maybe 5-7 yards, one at 15 and one at 25. And he ran this drill with no dot on at all, just framing with his optic. And it was an all alpha run and it was incredibly fast. And it was one of the strongest demonstrations of this, of the sighting system is not your limiter if you understand everything about the sighting system. So it can certainly be done, and it can certainly be done at a very high level. So anyway, that's kind of it for this one, guys. There might be more, but go experiment with it. Go, don't be afraid. Turn your dot off. Figure out, can I make a shot with it? Because things break. You could do the same thing with your iron-sighted gun. Use the back plate as a reference. There's so many things you can do. It's just a reference of how to point the gun. We put so much stock into it, the what's, whys, whens, and hows, just going, all right, there's information that the gun's providing me. Is it actionable? And if it is, you're going to be better off for it. So with that, I will see you guys next time. Thank you very much.